Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 26th of February of 2023. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to start with the Kupyansk frontline. The Russians reported that during the previous 24 hours the Ukrainians lost 6 commandos groups on the line between Sinkovka and Novoselovka, and also the Ukrainians lost 60 soldiers and 4 armored vehicles in this area. Furthermore, the Russians reported they continue attacking and shelling small village by the name of Masyutovka. This one, as you can see, if we zoom, we can't even find the buildings in this area because there are maybe 2 or 3 buildings that are hidden by the forest, and it's like the final and last checkpoint of the Ukrainians in this area. So the Russians stopped after taking control of Granikovka and Dvorechna, and after pushing the Ukrainians from this side on the west side of Dvorechna, the Russians stopped and they're not moving further, they're not attacking in this area, and so on. Also, the Russians reported that as a result of clashes, the Ukrainians lost another helicopter Mi-8 in this area. Now let's talk about Liman frontline. There are also a lot of interesting updates. The Russians reported that during the previous 24 hours, the Ukrainians lost 130 soldiers, 5 armored vehicles, and 2 artillery systems, 1 Akats and another D-20 Howitzer. Furthermore, the Russians are saying that they continue pushing using the active defense tactic in this area. Every single day, they report that they are taking another trenches, another checkpoint, another forest line, and so on. So we can say that there is a movement, but a very slow movement, maybe 10-20 meters a day or something like this. But this is not the most important. The most important part of this report is that the Russians reported that during the previous 24 hours the Ukrainians lost just 130 soldiers on this front line. Just remember this number because we will use this number a little bit later. If we compare this number with the previous days, for example, yesterday the Ukrainians lost 180 soldiers in this area, the day before yesterday 140 soldiers, and then the Ukrainians lost 185 soldiers and 135 soldiers within a week. So as you can see, the losses of Ukrainians on this front line are almost stable, have the stable level, but today I think that in comparison with the previous 2 days, the losses have been reduced and the level of the losses reduced. And maybe I believe that the culmination of clashes, the Russians passed this level, passed this stage of culmination of battle, but the losses, Ukrainian losses on Liman frontline are tightly connected with the operation in Bakhmut. And now I understand that when talking about Liman, the Russians weren't attacking the Ukrainians or weren't trying to penetrate their defense orders. That was some kind of support operation because the Russians knew and they understand the logistic roads and so on, and the Russians knew and they understood exactly that if the Ukrainians used any reserves, any manpower in Bakhmut, first of all, they would try to use the reserves from Liman because this area is very close to Bakhmut, and I believe that it will take maybe less than a day to redeploy some parts from Liman front line to Khromovo, to Bakhmut, to Chasov Yar to hold this area. So this is the reason why the Russians were attacking in this area. They were trying to pin down and to freeze the Ukrainians' reserves in this area. And to tell the truth, as I understand, the Russians did their job well. They freezed the forces in this area, they pinned them down, and they are not allow the Ukrainians to use reserves from Liman frontline in Bakhmut area. Because now let's talk about Bakhmut. As you can see, there are a lot of icons in this area. First of all, the Russians reported about establishing control over Dubovo-Vasilievka. Some sources are saying that this town was taken, some sources are saying that there are still heavy clashes, but anyway, I believe that if there are some clashes in this area, I believe that this is some kind of clearing operation from the Russian side. Dubovo-Vasilievka is under Russian control for like 95%, and the rest 5% is the things that they need to do to complete the clearing operation of this town. Furthermore, the Russians reported that during the previous 24 hours they managed to develop significant progress in the area between this Berkhovskaya water reservoir, this one, and this railroad. And the Russians managed to develop the bridgehead, managed to managed to establish position very far from their Berkhovka on this line line right on top of this small turn of the road that connects Canal town with Khromovo. So as you can see, the progress is very interesting, and we will return back to the Western sources map. We will update this map for better understanding, but the situation for the Ukrainians is critical. Furthermore, some Russian military experts are saying that from now on, we can say that there is a tactical encirclement of Bakhmut. Why is tactical encirclement? But as you can see, there are still a lot of places to use to cross the and to support Bakhmut. But you need to understand that the weather in Bakhmut is the weather and the temperature is higher than zero. And from now on, from this week, let's say maybe not from this week, not from the beginning, but at least from this weekend, it became very difficult to use fields to send armored vehicles, and the only type of unit that are able to move from Chasov Yar to Bakhmut is infantry. When talking about the road that connects Chasov Yar through Khromovo and Bakhmut, this road is under fire control, and Ukrainian sources confirm this information. And if the Russians' information about establishing control over this bridgehead is correct, that means that there are 100% physical control over this road, and I'm not sure that even the Ukrainians are able to use this road at night period of time. During 24 hours, the Ukrainians are going to have significant losses if they take a decision to use this road. The only possible way the only possible square that Ukrainians still able to use to supply and support Bakhmut is the road that goes from Chasov Yar through this forest and through these small intersections of road, this one, and after that also using the fields, using the very low quality road, they can support Bakhmut. But as I told you, the weather is let's say is warm, not warm, but the temperature is higher than zero, and the armored vehicles can't cross these fields. They will stuck, and they will be very slow, and of course the Russians will be able to destroy them easily. So furthermore, as you can see on the eastern part of Bakhmut, there are also progress according to the Russian sources, and some military experts on the ground are saying that there is a distance just in 300 meters between Russian positions and this river. So just 300 meters, and then the Russians will be able to split this territory in two parts, the north and the south one, and then they will take these parts separately and slowly and separately. Now let's talk about the Ministry of Defense report. The Russians reported that during the previous 24 hours, the Ukrainians lost just 100 soldiers, 7 armored vehicles, and 2 artillery systems in this area, 1 Avdiivka and 1 D30. So as you can see, the losses in comparison with the previous day are very low. If we compare, yesterday the Russians reported about 120 soldiers, the day before yesterday 240, and before that 210. And if you remember, yesterday I told you that maybe we are the witnesses of ending of some tactical operation, and we were talking about the penetration in the north. And during the active phase of penetration in the north, the Ukrainian losses were somewhere between 170 soldiers and 250 soldiers, so they were very high. But yesterday and today, the Russians reported just about 120 soldiers losses and 100. So as you can see, we have passed the culmination of clashes on the north. What does it mean? That means that the Russians complete and finished everything they wanted on the north. And these 2 days, they were trying to develop their bridgehead, to establish their positions, to prepare fortifications, to do everything they can, but not to lose the bridgehead that they gained as a result of clashes during the previous weeks. We discussed the situation and position of Ukrainians in Orekha, Vasilievka, Grigorievka, and Bogdanovka videos before. You know that this area is located on the hill, and it's some kind of suicide operation to continue offensive operation in this area, because the Russians are in the very low land, and the difference between these two these two levels is up to 70 meters. So this is a very big difference, and it's a very difficult operation to continue offensive operation without armor. And armor vehicles are no longer able to use these fields to attack. They will stuck in the mood on the ground, and they will be a very nice aims for artillery systems. So the Russians achieved as much as they could, and believe me that they don't need more. Now let's return back to the Western sources map, and let's try to update this map according to the information that the Russians provided us. And according to information we have from the Russian sources, at least now they control something like this on the north of Bakhmut area. So this is the situation on Bakhmut front line when talking about the north part of Bakhmut. And this information, we received this confirmation just from the Russian sources, so of course it's up to you to believe or not. But anyway, I believe that this is not a speculation, and I believe that this is exactly that the Russians controlled by the evening of the 26th of February. So this is the situation, and as you can see, the Russians got very close to this small turn on the road that connects Chasov Yar and Khromovo, this one. So I believe that the Russians, they don't need thousands of soldiers to establish control over this small turn, establish physical control. They have already established fire control, sniper control, and many other types of control over this area. Of course, to establish physical control will be very nice for them. So I believe that within the next 48 hours, the Russians will try to improve the bridgehead, and they will try to establish something like this. And as soon as they do this, we can say about that they will stop. The Russians will stop any movements on the north. And the only reason why they are moving on the north if Ukrainians took a decision to step back. For now, these territories are under Ukrainian control, but as I understand it, they see the Ukrainians haven't prepared their defense line in this area, so that's why they will step back, maybe within 24 hours, maybe within the next 48 hours, I don't know. But this is question has already solution, and this is not a matter of whether the Russians are able to do this or not. It's just a question of time, and the Ukrainians will be forced to step back from this bridgehead, from these forest lines in direction of Bogdanovka, and the Russians are no longer need to move any further from this area. But there is one problem, and the problem is Ivanivske, this area. The Russians started clashes and starting storming this town maybe 2 weeks ago, but there was days when they had progress, and at some days they were managed to penetrate this forest and to get the N32 road and even to cross this road physically. But then the Ukrainians moved fresh reserves in this area as Chechens, the Dudaev battalion and other battalions, and as a result of clashes, the Wagners were forced to step back towards more reliable positions. And for now, as we discussed just a few minutes ago, the most important square is this one. So this is the last area that Ukrainians are able to use. There are also losses, and the losses are very high. The only maybe possible period of day when the Ukrainians are able to use this square is night, when maybe the temperature goes below zero, and maybe the night is only part of day when the temperature is below zero, and when the Ukrainians maybe are able to use some vehicles to cross these fields and to supply support forces in Bakhmut. And as you can see, the Russians have a lot of problems, and they still aren't able to establish control over Ivanivske. So also they think that the losses of the Ukrainians reduced during the previous 2 days. I believe that the Russians started regrouping by the fact that they complete their mission on the north. To take control over Bakhmut, they don't need better bridgehead, or they don't need to develop anything. Of course, it's very risky. The Ukrainians can attack the Russians all the time from the north, from the west, from the southwest, and so on. But I believe that they know what they're doing, because according to timings, they need to penetrate Ivanivske. So I believe that these days, these minutes, they started regrouping, and they're sending their forces from the north to the south to increase the pressure in this direction. And these days, the Russians reported, some Russian sources are saying that as a result of clashes during the previous 24 hours, the Russians managed to return some position in the forest that located on the west south of Ivanivske. So let's update this map according to the Russian information we have. So this is the area that they managed to return control over, but they still haven't cut the N32 road. And as you can see, the main road that Ukrainians still are able to use goes through the forest. So this is the town, the suburbs of Chasov Yar. They can use the local roads along the brushes, forest line. Then using the forest line, they can move along the river. And there is if you take a look at the Western Sources map, as you can see, this is a reliable road, the reliable area to use for. As you can see, there is a road. There are a lot of roads. Of course, they're with a bad quality, and sometimes maybe during the daytime you are not able to use it. But at night, I believe that you can do this, and the losses are not so high. Maybe sometimes you're able to cross this area without even losses at all. But this is the last point. And if the Ukrainians lose this area, we can say about cauldron, not even about tactical encirclement or about operational encirclement. It's going to be a cauldron of Bakhmut cauldron. But to do this, they need to do something with Ivanivske. And these days, the Russians are pushing from the south in direction of this forest, in direction of this river. They're attacking in direction of Ivanivske itself. And furthermore, the Russians took a decision to attack the west-south outskirts of Bakhmut as well, the area of airplane. So this is the best area for foreign volunteers. They like to make photo in this part of Bakhmut. There is a statue of aircraft of MiG-29 or MiG-25, I believe. So they like to make a photo here. So this is the entrance point in Bakhmut from the southwest. So the Russians took a decision to attack all of the front line using the broad front line attack, just to penetrate anywhere. They don't care if they're able to take control on the west side, inside of Ivanivske, inside of the south. They need to penetrate at least anywhere. And if they're able to do this, of course, the situation of the Ukrainians in this area will be decreased. And this is going to be a beginning of entire collapse of Bakhmut. So this is also the reason why the Russians, the losses of Ukrainians was reduced during the first 24 hours, because the Russians took a decision to regroup and to increase the pressure from the south. So the south of Bakhmut, to be more precise, the part of road of N32 between Konstantinovka and Bakhmut is the focal vital point. So this area is the main area, is the global area, is the most important area of Bakhmut, and the destiny and the history and the result of these clashes now completely depends on the town by the name of Ivanivske and the part of road that connects the channel on the west, Ivanivske, and the airport square with the aircraft MiG-25. So this is the final part of Bakhmut clashes. And if the Russians are able to turn this page, Bakhmut is going to be encircled and they're going to be a cauldron. And this is going to be an epic situation for the Ukrainians. But the question is whether the Russians are able to do this or not. I believe that Ukrainians will fight for this territory as long as I can, no matter losses, no counting losses. They confirmed this information many times, and we'll see. But the Russians also understand the value of this area, and they will do their best to do this, to establish control over this blue cloud square, over Ivanivske, and after that there's going to be a completely different story. And then we can start talking about, let's say, the first days of offensive operation in direction of Chasov Yar, because Bakhmut is going to be encircled, and sooner or later this town is going to fall. Now let's move further to the south. Let's go to Donetsk and to Avdiivka. Yesterday we discussed about some progress of the Russians in this area. Today in the morning we received some Russian sources on the ground were saying that there were no progress in the vicinity of Krasnogorovka, but later another sources confirmed that there is a progress in the vicinity of Krasnogorovka. So for now the situation around Avdiivka is complicated and is covered with the fog of war, so difficult to understand what's really going on there. When talking about Marinka, there are a lot of updates. As you can see, the Russians activated in this area the attacks in central part, the attacks in the north part, and they're trying to develop their bridgehead around this hill. If we take a look at the Institute of Study of War map, I remind you one more time that this area that located on the south east from Pobeda, small village that located on the south of Marinka, is a hill of 250 meters, and this is the highest position in this area. And of course, it's the very tasty piece of cake for the Russians. If they are able to take control over these trenches, they will be able to control the source forces Ukraine, Bakhmutovka, Konstantinovka, Paraskoivka, and Pobeda itself. So we're talking about this, and the Russians made a few attempts to storm this area, so we'll see what is going to be next, but I expect that they will be able to take control over this town. I hope that they're not going to repeat the situation like in Ugledar, because Ugledar is this battle of Ugledar is also going to enter the history, and we will remember this battle for ages, I believe. So the Russians reported that during the previous 24 hours of clashes on the South Donetsk and Zaporizhzhia area, the Ukrainians lost 75 soldiers and 5 armored vehicles, including 1 tank. So the Ukrainians continue losing their tanks on the south. They moved a lot of armored vehicles to stop the Russian offensive operation. So for now, they're pretty successful. But now, at this stage of special operation, they need to stretch the army between Ugledar and between Marinka, because the Russians activated in Marinka as well. So the situation is complicated, but I believe that situation is completely controllable by the Ukrainians, under Ukrainian control. When talking about Zaporizhzhia, there were no changes, just an update about the piece of news that Ukrainians lost another ammo depot in near Gulay Polya. Kherson region brought us more updates. As a result of clashes during the previous 24 hours, or to be precise, of artillery duels, the Ukrainians lost 70 soldiers, 6 armored vehicles, and 3 artillery D-30 howitzers. So as you can see, the Ukrainians continue losing their army in Kherson, and this is very interesting because we can say that Kherson and Kupyansk front lines are they have a lot of similar, but when talking about Kupyansk, there are active phase of clashes on the ground. There is defense active defense tactic, and there is a possibility to meet your enemy on the ground. But when talking about Kherson, there are no possibilities to meet enemy on the ground because there is a river that split parties, and it's highly unlikely that the Russians send their forces on the Ukrainian bank of the river. But as you can see, starting from let's say the end of December, the Russians included this front line into their reports, and every single day they are saying about the losses among the manpower from the Ukrainian side. What does it mean? I believe, in my opinion, is that there are a lot of Russian agents in Kherson region. So those spies and people amongst civilians that the Russians took a decision to keep in Kherson while crossing the river, and they were silent, in silent mode. They didn't show themselves, but after a few months, now when the most of the attention over Bakhmut and Liman front line, the Russian spy agents activated, and they now started giving a lot of information for the Russians, and the most important, they started targeting and aiming the Russian artillery systems, and as a result, as you can see, the Russians are pretty effective in Kherson, and the Ukrainians are losing a lot of manpower, a lot of armored vehicles, and a lot of artillery systems on this bank of the river. So the situation is very interesting. Maybe the Russians are planning to return back here. So anyway, they're planning, but the question is when they're planning to do this. And when talking about Moldova and Pridnestrovia, this is like the title in Russian of this area. Today, the Russian sources published some kind of military order to start offensive operation in direction of Pridnestrovia. I don't know whether this operation is going to take place or not, but if you ask me, I give my opinion. I believe that Ukrainians are ready for everything. And I believe that it's the thing that they need. They need to involve as much as possible countries, not just in the supply and support sphere. They need to involve as much as possible regions into real combat, into real war. So, and they want to include Moldova to start war with Russia, with Prидnestrovia as well, and it works in their favor to have more allies on the ground, not just allies as supporters and vendors or something like this. So that's why I believe that they will start doing something in this area, and I believe that also Bakhmut is going to fall very soon, and this is going to be immediate strategy for the Ukrainians, and the Ukrainians, to keep their people, to keep minds of their people, they need to show them, and they need to cover this loss with some victory. And I believe that Ukrainians keeps the situation with Pridnestrovia as a case to cover the negative consequences of losing Bakhmut. So at the same day when the Ukrainians loses Bakhmut, maybe the next day they will start offensive operation in Pridnestrovia, and this will increase the spirit and the mood of people of Ukraine. They will show them that we are able to do this. So I believe that Ukrainians just wait for the ending of Bakhmut operation. They don't want to start this operation before, because if they start this operation today, the Ukrainians will be happy for a few days, and after that they will lose Bakhmut, and all their attempts, all their tries will be reduced to zero, and no effect from Pridnestrovia. But if they start this operation after Bakhmut, they can reduce the negative consequences of losing of Bakhmut till zero within a day or two. So they're keeping this case as an alternative, as an option to when losing Bakhmut. So this is my opinion what is happening here in this area. When talking about the Russians, what are they planning to do with this? Very difficult to understand, as I told you. If the Russians are able, no matter losses in armored vehicles, helicopters, air forces, anything, they need to take Odessa and this part of Ukraine. And if they're able to do this, then it's the only option how to stop Ukrainians in Pridnestrovia. But we understand that now the Russians are no longer can't do this. They can't do this. Maybe they will start offensive operation in Sumy. Just you're taking this region, we're getting another region. I don't know. But anyway, the situation is critical and develops very fast. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in Ukraine. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.